very tasty, but very time consuming too.
Did you have a special word for that in German? That meat? I keep hearing about Peckelfleisch, but I'm not sure what that is.
Peckelfleisch is different. Yes. Peckelfleisch is pig's what?
Yeah.
That's like Peckelfleisch would be the equivalent of what you now buy as head cheese.
Are you
Okay.
sure?
Yeah, because it would be the spices, and then it would all be cooked in the brine, and then it would turn into a solid gelled mash. At least that's how I remember we did it when we butchered.
Lois, do you remember that Peckelfleisch from Retzlaff's? No, I don't either. So those are a
I
few.
know that.
Yeah, even my father-in-law used to
they
do
made
his own
that sausage,
cheese.
and they were always afraid they were going to
We
lose the
did
recipe,
pickled
so
heart and
they
tongue.
wrote it on one of the wood beams in the cellar.
Pickled heart and tongue.
And that was a lot of work too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of younger ones, my wife, she brought up with it too. It's like cooking the spices is a strong odor on the stove. A lot of the younger women wouldn't like the odor, the spice for the pickled heart and tongue.
Yeah, you have to
So even my wife did that for a lot of the other ones when we pickled heart and tongue ourselves. But also, if the heart was big enough, it was enough for a roast, the beef hearts. But pickling it is like using it then for lunch meat. You could, and we did it with Cloy's Butchering down on 104, Davy Cloy. And his dad had the butcher shop down on 104. And after they didn't do it, wife and I were still doing it. And we'd take stuff down to them, him and his wife and the gang. Oh, here comes the good stuff, break time. Open it up.
Wow.
But my wife, when she was still able, used to cook great big kettles of that and put it all up like that. Can it. It's another way, canning that and then using it for, slice it up and stuff and stack it in the jars.
Anybody else think of anything? Schroeder's bought some neat stuff. Show and tell.
I want to get back to Diannne said about the ham. Now, the ham would have been smoked, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And do you remember where they smoked it or how they smoked it?
Well, I think my dad took it someplace, but at Retzlaff's, they had the smokehouse, and my husband said the hams were left out there in the smokehouse after after they were done curing, and then they would go out and get a hunk of it to eat.
That too. Yeah.
So, I don't understand this whole butchering thing. I mean, can just barely remember my grandma and grandpa still butchering, and dad told me how that, I said, how do you get the intestines clean to stuff the sausage? Because grandma made he said you cut them in pieces, and I remember her boiling them in salt water, but then you turn them inside out.
Turn them inside out.
Scrub them all out, and then stuff them.
Yeah.
And then she smoked them for about 2 weeks, the sausage.
Oh, yeah, at least 2 weeks.
I can see my grandmother still sitting at the sink, blowing with her mouth, blowing them inside out.
The casing.
Didn't you have to have a certain kind of wood for smoking too?
Grandma used a lot of corn cobs.
She used corn cobs, but if you got some good mushy apple wood, and there's one other kind of wood, I forget, but they made a flavor of it. But here's
It had to be a certain kind of wood.
towards the end, though, you had to take the stuff in the house at night because guys went around and stole a lot
Stealing it.
of the smokehouses.
Really?
Yeah.
My grandfather, guys would go to Marlboro to eat. They'd go to railroad tracks to his land, and then they'd come up through there and
I helped with some of the butchering that we still did on our farm, and by the time I got to helping with it, the hams and the shoulders were taken to someplace else. But from what I remember them talking when it was done on our farms, the sausage was put in the smokehouse first, and then downstairs or wherever they had them were the really big ceramic crocks. The hams and the shoulders were put in there in a salt brine. And my mom said that Grandpa made sure that the salt brine was always strong enough that an egg would float. And every once in a while he'd have to add more salt to it. And that meat would stay in that brine for at least 2 or 3 weeks before it went out to the smokehouse. So that by the time that went into the smokehouse, the sausage was done. And Mom said that most of the time the smokehouse didn't stop being used until, if you were lucky, the end of January, sometimes even until February, that they would keep on smoking depending upon how the size of it was.
So most of the, what I can't wrap my head around is, a pig is pretty big. And you've got the ham, and you're smoking the ham, and you're making all the sausage out of all the scrap meat. And then the rest of it was some of it pickled maybe? Or was it where all the roast in there was everything smoked?
Oh, a lot of that was all turned into sausage because they didn't have freezing.
Yeah.
So you had the hams and the shoulders, and then everything else was probably pretty well turned into sausage.
Oh, ground up and made into sausage?
Like for the front legs, the bottom of the back legs, the heads, that was all cooked off and cooked all off into a gelatinous, all the spices, and that became either, some of that meat you might save to make liver sausage, but some of it was also pickled meat, as I remember.
Okay.
And then all the fat, I remember them cooking the fat, rendering, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah.
We were warned to stay away from the stove because that fat was boiling and boiling. It had to be chopped into squares.
And it was ground up and then cooked out, and Martha and I are from the same family. I remember that whenever we were going to butcher, Mom always made sure she had at least a handle basket, if not more, of Cortland apples, because she would cut up a bunch of apples and put apples in there to help give the lard a nice flavor.
Well, that also renders it.
Yeah.
It clarifies the lard.
Oh, you didn't eat the apples, but the juice that cooked out into the
that flavor.
lard gave it a nice flavor. And one other thing, I looked for it and I couldn't find it. We have a thing at home, or had. Probably in your kitchens now you have these small graters that you can grate lemons, onions, or if you want to make your coleslaw in there instead of the food processor. The one we have at home is probably about 1 foot wide by 2.5 feet long, and that I was told they used for cabbage when they filled up the big crock full of sauerkraut. My father's side of the family, Grandpa made a big crock of sauerkraut every year. Mom's side, they did every couple of years. And I've found it really interesting that it's gotten to be really popular. I've noticed it a couple times on Channel 17 lately, that they're talking about all of a sudden fermenting vegetables again and how good and healthy it is for you. And I'm thinking to myself, it's the old joke, everything old is new again.
Yep.
Now, some of the really old farm courthouses around here actually had what they called a black closet up in the second story, built right into the chimney, and you would hang the meat in there to smoke it from the smoke that was coming up